welcome to my channel. My name is Taylor Isaac. I am a writer and an author, and today in this video we're going to be digging into the fascinating concept of wisdom. We live in the information age and we have nearly endless answers to nearly endless questions. But are we more wise? And if the answer is no, the question is why? What is the difference between wisdom and information, and why is this so important for us today? We're going to be taking a look at an old-time movie with one of the most famous characters from history to see how wisdom really works in the world. And then we're going to turn our attention to an ancient Greek philosopher to get his take on the matter to see how we might cultivate this ourselves.
Saddle up, partner.
The movie we're exploring today is called The Ten Commandments, and it follows the life of Moses.
I am Moses.
Who's Moses?
It is a 1950s movie directed by the old famous Hollywood director Cecil B. DeMille. We're going to be exploring two scenes in particular. One is when Moses returns back from a military conquest with Ethiopia, and the second one is when an elderly woman's garment gets trapped under a stone and many different lives are on the line. We're going to be watching how Moses navigates through these situations, and not only what he does, but what he does in relationship to the others around him. Let's dig in. A quick search of the definition for wisdom tells us, wisdom is the ability to discern or judge what is true, right, or lasting. It's insight, the ability to discern inner qualities and relationships. Let's keep that in mind as we watch these next scenes.
The Lord Moses, Prince of Egypt, son of the Pharaoh's sister, beloved of the Nile god, commander of the Solomon. Welcome to my sister's son. We have heard how you took Ibis from the Nile to destroy the venomous serpents used against you when you laid siege to the city of Saba.
May my arms stay strong in your service, great city.
Who is this fair young god come into the house of Pharaoh?
No need to tell you how I share her joy at your return.
No need, my brother. Great one, I bring you Ethiopia.
Command them to kneel before Pharaoh.
Command what you have conquered, my brother. I bring the Ethiopian king and his sister in friendship, as an ally to guard our southern gates.
My son has dealt wisely with you, Ethiopia. Welcome as a friend.
Okay, right away we see that there is a distinction between Moses and Ramses. Moses has just returned from a military conquest in Ethiopia, and Ramses tells the Ethiopian king to bow to Pharaoh, but Moses stops him. The king comes in friendship, he says. We see here that Moses and Ramses have two very different ways of relating to both strategy and relationships. Whereas Ramses might have conquered the king, as Moses says, Moses took a different tack, establishing a mutually beneficial relationship. He had wise dealings with his enemy. Of course, it's not always wise to befriend an enemy, but this seems to tell us that Moses has the ability to discern this. He knows when to apply strength and when to apply restriction, when to apply severity and when to apply mercy, and perhaps more. Why conquer when you can connect? Let's watch the next scene.
Great King, I will ask but one favor of your friendship. This green stone from our mountains, that I may give it to your Prince of Egypt, for he is kind as well as wise.
Fine one, here is the full count of Ethiopia's tribute. I'm sending down the Nile 20 full barges of such wealth as you see here, all for your new treasure city.
A handsome tribute indeed, Moses. Unfortunately, I have no new treasure city.
And you will have none. The stiff-necked slaves die more willingly than bend their backs in your service.
Why?
I think here we see another key element to Moses' wisdom. So Ramses was charged with the task of building Seti, a treasure city, but he's not been successful in his mission. Why? Because he says the slaves don't want to work. But what Moses does here, you could say, is the start of all wisdom. He asks why. While Ramses has already decided that the reason things aren't working out the way he wants them to is because others aren't doing what they should be doing. Moses, on the other hand, believes there's a deeper reason, so he asks why. Why is it that they aren't willing to work? He understood that because they don't want to wasn't a complete answer. There was more behind the situation. Let's watch the next scene.
They believe a deliverer has come to lead them from their bondage.
Deliverer. Deliverer. He has been foretold by every falling star since my father's time. And now you make him an excuse for your failure to build my city.
I'm not one to make excuses. You doubt me? Let Moses build the city.
Your wish is my will.
Then you build my city.
Wise decision. Noble task.
All women! All women! All priests under the center stone! You over there!
Stop the stone!
Keep pulling up there!
Yoshabel is caught! Stop the stone!
Pull!
You killer! Stop the stone!
We don't stop a moving block for an old woman! Lay on the lash! Keep moving!
Yoshabel! Stop the stone! Stop the stone!
It's moving there! Hold! Hold on! Hold the ropes! Hold the forming of this rope! Hold on! Let the old woman loose. You say where she is and you'll die in the lion pit.
Joshua!
Let Joshua run to the prince and beg mercy.
Mercy from Ramses.
No, the Prince Moses there on the pavilion.
Mercy! Prince Moses! Mercy, Prince Moses!
Come here.
Mercy? What have you done?
Not for myself, Lord Prince. For a slave who saved old Yoshabel and me from death. But between the granite blocks.
A delicate flower to be pressed between walls of stone.
How were you saved?
A stonecutter struck the overseer.
There could be only one punishment for the stonecutter.
Blood makes poor mortar. Come.
Here's something that's interesting. The master builder with the headdress. When Lilia runs to Moses, Moses asks, "What did you do?" Basically, what happened? The builder, however, looks at her and sees she's beautiful and immediately begins to think about his own desires, what he wants. So we see Moses is able to relate to things at a much wider scale. He doesn't look for the picture he wants to know what's actually there. What creates another distinction between Moses and Ramsey is the quality of mercy. And this takes us back to our original recognition, that Moses knows when and how to apply appropriate amounts of strength and restriction. On the other hand, we see the master builder says there's only one option here for the stonecutter. There's no mercy. There's not even the desire to know more about the situation. There's no sense of inherent humanity.
Prince Moses! Get away!
Did you bury the old woman alive in a tomb of rock?
My noble one, it caught. I had not the strength to free myself.
Your shoulders should not bear a burden, old woman.
The Lord has renewed my strength and lightened my burdens.
He would have done better to remove them.
They use the old ones to do the work of greasing the stones, Lord Prince. If they are killed, it is no loss.
Are you a master builder or a master butcher?
If we stop moving stones for every grease woman who falls, the city would never rise.
Again, we see a distinction. Whereas the builder sees the old woman in terms of utility, an expendable object in the building of the city,
Is your agenda, man?
Moses sees a deeper picture. He sees an old woman who, in reality, is unable to bear heavy burdens. It's not a nice conclusion, it's a real one. Reality reveals that the old woman is put in an inappropriate place according to her capacity. However, the Egyptians aren't interested in individual capacity, but rather in how each individual contributes to their overall directive. And yet Moses was able to tap into the wisdom of reality around him, the desire for things to be in their proper function.
If the slaves are not driven, they will not work. If their work lags, it is because they are not fed.
You seem strong enough.
I am a stone cutter. The pharaohs like their images cut deep. Hold your wit!
You know it is death to strike an Egyptian?
I know it.
Yet you struck him. Why?
To save the old woman.
What is she to you?
An old woman. Lord Prince, send him to his death.
The man has courage. You do not speak like a slave.
Joshua here isn't saving the woman because she works for him or gives him some sort of overt benefit. There's a deeper recognition here that it's the right thing to do. We see with the Egyptians that rightness relates to what benefits them directly. In this scene, it's almost like Moses is going through an awakening. When he asks Joshua, "Who is she to you?" and Joshua replies, "An old woman," Moses is now set against his own culture, the Egyptian idea of rightness, and now has to openly contend with a different, deeper form of rightness. He doesn't immediately shut down this rub with reality, if you will. In his wisdom, Moses is able to probe to those deeper levels, to ask and understand the deeper why as it relates to humanity. The question is, where does this rightness come from?
God made men. Men made slaves.
Which God?
God of Abraham. The Almighty God.
If your God is almighty, why does he leave you in bondage?
He will choose the hour of our freedom and the man who will deliver us.
Lord Prince, this man speaks treason.
It is not treason to want freedom. Release him.
Here we see how Moses is able to discern things. He applies right judgment. Whereas the Egyptians see the stonecutter as treasonous, Moses recognizes that the desire for freedom is a fundamental aspect of humanity. It's not treason to want freedom, he says. The master builder, however, does think it's treason. Why? Because it goes against what the Egyptians decree as reality. The stonecutter is treasonous simply because it goes against them and what they want, think, and believe. But Moses is able to assess treason through a wider lens. We see here too that Moses values courage, and that when he speaks to a man who is a slave who has courage, a noble virtue if there ever was one, he calls into question the idea of whether this man or any man is any different from himself. And if they aren't different from himself, how could one will the other? Moses is able to once again pierce through the depths in order to see what is true, right, and lasting.
Difficulty with the slaves, my brother.
None that could not be cured by a ration of grain and a day of rest.
A day of rest?
When your horses tire, they're rested. When they hunger, they're fed.
Slaves draw stone and brick. My horses draw the next pharaoh.
Is there any grain stored here in Goshen?
None that you would dare take, my brother.
Temple granaries are full.
Bring the push-pole men and some women with baskets.
I will.
In reality, if something is tired, it must have rest. This too Moses recognizes, whereas Ramses seems to apply a different logic. His horses are different from slaves in that they pull the next pharaoh. They deserve rest because of what they do, their utility. But Moses sees that rest isn't something that's related to worthiness. Rather, it's a fundamental aspect of the nature of things. And here's the big distinction. It seems Ramses has his own rules, while Moses seeks to understand the rules of life. He's not judging according to his own standards, but wants to know the standards, how to work within the natural frameworks to produce the best results. And I believe this brings us to a remarkable understanding that under the big W of wisdom, there are three smaller ones. That if we want to be wise, there are three things we have to consider: why, wait, and waste. Why? To understand the situation and therefore the appropriate response. Wait? To apply value, what one puts on the scales. For example, Ramses' horse. Ramses held that the horse was more valuable than a Hebrew slave, and that an elderly woman was less valuable and therefore more disposable. However, Moses saw things in a bigger, deeper way. He saw both the reality of fundamental needs and inherent humanity. Waste. To apply things appropriately, effectively, and efficiently. to make good use of. An example is Lilia, a water girl. The master builder saw her beauty as being wasted. It could be better used in a different environment in service to the Egyptians. On the other hand, the movie seems to tell us that Moses believed killing a strong stonecutter who had courage and an old woman would be waste. All of these three things, I believe, constitute a larger wisdom. A wisdom that isn't from nowhere, based on whims and wants, but one that seeks to tell us something about reality itself.
You guys up for a toga party?
Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, Aristotle. Aristotle was an ancient Greek philosopher whose work helped lay the foundation of Western philosophy and civilization. He wrote extensively on the topics of ethics, logic, metaphysics, rhetoric, and biology, among others. But two of his most famous concepts were character and virtue. Aristotle believed moral virtue was the only practical road to effective action, and that for one to see things as they truly are, he must first have character. That clear vision, as it were, only exists for the person of character, who is then able to judge rightly, who is then able to determine the best course of action, and that the actions of the person of character are what one might call virtuous. But seeing clearly, according to Aristotle, wasn't simply about understanding, but about recognizing. And what was the person of character recognizing? Nothing other than the beautiful. The Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy explains his view like this: what the person of good character loves with right desire and thinks of as an end with right reason must first be perceived as beautiful. Hence, the virtuous person sees truly and judges rightly, since beautiful things appear as they truly are only to a person of good character. So what does this have to do with wisdom? Aristotle believed achieving good character was a process of clearing away the obstacles that stand in the way of the full efficacy of the soul, and that it is only in the middle ground between habits of acting and principles of action that the soul can allow right desire and right reason to make their appearance. This middle ground, or mean, is what Aristotle described as a virtue, or the right expression between two opposing characteristics. For example, the virtue courage. When taken to excess, it becomes reckless, but when deficient, it becomes cowardice. An action counts as virtuous, according to Aristotle, when one holds oneself in a stable equilibrium of the soul in order to choose the action knowingly and for its own sake. This stable equilibrium of the soul is what constitutes character, and what one chooses from that state of equilibrium will naturally be beautiful or good. So where am I going with all this? What I think this seems to suggest, at least from my view of things, is that all of this constitutes a sort of wisdom. That wisdom is found in the ability to discern between what is good and what is not good, to see things as they truly are, which requires a clearing away of the obstacles that stand in the way of the full efficacy of the soul. And that wisdom isn't so much about the acquiring of information as it is about the development of character, so that the soul's natural wisdom and ways come through, enabling one to see truly and judge rightly, resulting in action that can be described as virtuous. This seems to suggest that an element of true wisdom is to know that what is good or bad isn't for us to decide. It's already been decided. Rather, it's for us to discover and then apply, to embody it into action. So let's return to our original question. What is the difference between information and wisdom, and why is it important? I believe it's this. Information tells us what makes a good life, but wisdom is what enables us to actually live it. Wisdom manifests itself in judgments, decisions, relationships, and actions. Information is the words on a page, the numbers, stories, and data, and therefore we can have infinite information and no real wisdom if we can't appropriately apply it, if we don't understand how it works in greater relationships, and if we can't bring ourselves into a state of equilibrium with it. And I think this is why in the information age, wisdom is so important. If we are to make good use of information, to make good choices, to live good lives, we need wisdom, because without it, one is not able to really live. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.
Godspeed.
Move!